for Russian government actions that seek to harm our sovereignty. That was also the message around the call that the president had with President Putin just a few weeks ago. We want to move to a more stable and predictable place. But we also, when we announced our sanctions, we left in there maximum optionality to put in place additional actions should their actions warrant. No one wants to get to that point, but we reserve that right should we decide it's warranted. Go ahead.
What's your message to Republican lawmakers who see today's jobs report as a reason not to pass this additional $4 trillion in spending, and how are you going to continue those negotiations given the report today?
Well, that's hard to square if they are suggesting that it is not a report that meets expectations while also saying that they don't think we should work together to do something to help put more people back to work. So that's kind of hard to understand.
We have yet to see the effects of this $2 trillion get through the economy, and we're losing jobs. Why is that?
Of the American Rescue Plan, I actually don't think that's what economists would convey, or nor is it what they have conveyed. We've created about an average of 500,000 jobs a month over the last 3 months. That's in stark contrast to about 60,000 jobs a month during the final 3 months of President Trump's administration. And there's no question, by data, by economic standards, by economic experts' standards, that the money that has been put into the economy, the $1,400 checks and the stimulus has helped put people back to work. We also know we're continuing to make progress. And this is going to be a long road, as we've always said. So it just requires additional assistance, additional stimulus, additional work together to put more people back to work, which is why the president proposed the American Jobs Plan.
On the FDA's approval, expected to authorize the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds any day now, what specific plans does the White House have in place to get the vaccine distributed to that age group?
Well, the president talked about this just a couple of days ago, and if and when, we'll see, the FDA approves the EUA for 12 to 15-year-olds, we will absolutely operationalize and ensure that we're distributing that vaccine out into the country and in a way where we're meeting people where they are, working with primary care physicians, working with pharmacies, community health centers, and ensuring that we get that vaccine and those doses out to meet a new group of Americans who might be eligible. Go ahead.
President Biden has a meeting next week with congressional leaders. What is he hoping to accomplish?
He does have it on May 12th. It's going to be March 12th. May 12th, sorry. He has a meeting, bicameral, bipartisan meeting here in the White House. He's hoping to talk about ways that we can work together to put people back to work, to ensure we are making our workforce more competitive, to competing with China. And he knows that the American people elected him to solve problems and to represent and govern for all people. And he's hoping that these leaders will come together and join him in the Oval Office to have a discussion about doing exactly that.
And just one more, is there a time that's been set for the meeting with the president and Capito on infrastructure?
Not yet. We are working with her and her team and a group of Republican members of her choosing on identifying a time and day that will work. Hopefully we'll have more on that later today. We will see, and as soon as we do have that locked in, we'll share with all of you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Jen, we did notice the president meeting yesterday briefly with Senators Kennedy and Cassidy on the tarmac in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Was that a substantive conversation? Were any deals reached, or was it just pleasantries?
If deals were reached, that would have been very efficient of all of them. I would say that, I haven't talked to the president about his specific private conversation with them. Certainly they could speak to what they discussed, but the trip yesterday where the president stood in front of a 70-year-old bridge, one that's 20 years in the making of having upgrades done, should be seen and viewed as his effort to send a message to leaders in that state, but also to people across the country that bridges and rebuilding bridges is not a democratic idea. It's an American idea. And the same with rebuilding roads, and the same with ensuring that we have efficient ways to travel, that kids have access to clean drinking water. And the fact that they joined him on that trip is an example of how the president is reaching across the aisle. He wants to do work together. He's committed to doing that. And I know he enjoyed his trip yesterday.
question to drill down on something you were asked a couple of days ago.
Okay.
It was about the debt ceiling.
Yep.
Just to nail it down, because for the last 10 years or so, every time this issue comes up, there's been a robust debate in legal circles about whether the debt ceiling itself violates the 14th Amendment and the clause that says that the debt of the national government should not be questioned. What's this administration's position on that question?
I will, here's what I know, Steve, and I will talk with our legal experts on that because I don't want to speak out of turn. The president obviously has voted to increase the debt ceiling in the past and advocated for it as vice president, and he believes that it should be a process that Democrats and Republicans move forward on, just as they did 3 times during the Trump administration, including the same year where Congress passed $2 trillion in tax cuts for the highest income. That's his view, but I will see if there's any legal response to that particular question. I remember this debate, so you're bringing me back. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Jen. 2 questions. Several states, including South Carolina and Montana, are already looking at trimming unemployment benefits, saying that the labor shortage is created by the federal government's supplemental employment programs. Is the administration worried about a domino effect, or that other states would do this? Or is there any outreach plan to stop states from doing this?
Well, we have, of course, seen that. I will say that though some individual employers may be experiencing increased difficulty finding workers, we haven't seen widespread labor shortages are not yet evident in the data. And obviously, there's always going to be a look at the data by our economic experts, and we are seeing little evidence that enhanced unemployment benefits are currently impacting or affecting Americans' willingness to work. We do recognize, as Secretary Yellen talked about a bit, that labor supply has been affected by the pandemic for a range of reasons, including childcare and schools fortunately beginning to reopen more than 50%, 5 days a week, just to note the data that came out just a few days ago. But there are lingering challenges that are unique to this moment, and we're certainly hopeful as schools reopen, as employers are better positioned, that we will be able to move to a different place. But we're not seeing that as an impact, as labor shortages as a mass widespread impact in the data.
One more question. Last month you said that you'd provide an update on the president's medical records. I was trying to get a sense of when do you think there's going to be an update, seeing as he hasn't released them since, I think, December 2019?
I don't have an update at this moment, but certainly when he has his next medical appointment, we will be transparent about that and provide that information to all of you.
Is one scheduled?
I'm not aware of one being scheduled, but certain. You're fine. It's okay. It's a Friday. Give everybody a break. You're fine. This was falling down last week. We had a plane flying over a few weeks ago. You never know. We don't have, I'm not aware of one scheduled at this point, but we certainly will provide you all information and data in a transparent way when it is scheduled and once he has that appointment. Go ahead.
Thanks. There have been a number of media reports in recent days on a series of newly reported cases over the past 12 months of Americans experiencing Havana syndrome at home and abroad, including CIA officers, U.S. troops, and U.S. government officials in the Washington area. So a couple questions on this. How concerned are you about these newly reported cases over the past couple months?
Well, first, let me say that the health and well-being of American public servants is a paramount priority to the administration, and we take extremely seriously reports by our personnel of anomalous health incidents. Our national security staff is working closely with agencies and departments across the federal government to address unexplained health incidents that some government employees have suffered and to ensure the safety and security of Americans serving around the world. And we are, of course, investigating incidents in which personnel have reported experiencing sensory phenomena such as sound, pressure, or heat concurrent with or followed by physical symptoms such as sudden onset vertigo, nausea, and head or neck pain. At this moment, we don't know the cause of these incidents, which are both limited in nature and the vast majority of which have been reported overseas. So right now we are working to investigate, taking every report seriously, and our national security team is overseeing that process.
You say the vast majority have taken place overseas. How many cases have been reported to have occurred in the United States?
I don't have any more specifics on reported incidents. I'm happy to see if there's more we can provide on that.
And how many cases total have been reported over the 5 years that this phenomenon has been known to us?
It's an excellent question. It's limited, but let me see if there's a more specific number we can provide to all of you.
My last question on this, what is the NSC doing that is new, that again, over 5 years, 3 administrations, we've seen this phenomenon occur? What's new that they're doing to try to get to the bottom?
Well, I can't obviously speak to what the last administration did or didn't do. What I can tell you is that our team is coordinating a full review of intelligence reporting to ascertain whether there may be previously unreported incidents that fit a pattern. We are also working closely, as I noted, with agencies and departments across federal government to address unexplained health incidents that sometimes they're reported in to different agencies and it hasn't all been gathered into one place. So that's how you can look at it across the board and see if there are patterns. So that's a way we are approaching it. And I can't obviously assess how that compares with past administrations.
Just one last question on a different topic, on Russia. What gives this administration the impression that Vladimir Putin wants a stable and predictable relationship?
Well, all I can speak to, Michael, is what our intentions are and what's in the interest of the United States. And in our view, it's in the interest of the United States to have a stable and predictable relationship with Russia. It doesn't mean that we are going to hold back, as we've talked about a little bit before, from implementing consequences when their behavior warrants, as we did just a couple of weeks ago. But that's the reason that the president offered to have a meeting. Again, we're working through the question of, some logistics, but place, location, time, agenda, all the specifics, and that was always going to happen at a staff level. It's really up to them what they want to achieve, but here's what we know. The United States is a member of the G7. We're working in close partnership with our partners and allies around the world, from Europe to Asia to, on a range of shared global interests. And I think the question for Russia is whether they want to be a part of that global community. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Jen, how you doing? The first one, I know you're just doing your week ahead and it's not settled, but do you have a time for the BICAN meeting? Because as you know, House Republicans are going through some leadership elections.
I've heard that. We don't have a time. It may be set, Jeff. Let me see. I think we'll put out some more details on the week ahead, but I don't have the time in front of me.
Whether it's the first part of the day or the second part of the day.
Correct. Correct.
Back on the Russia issue, I know you've done a lot of these.
Yeah.
And you mentioned U.S. sovereignty, but Putin, there's also a move in Russia to crack down on internal dissent, including declaring Navalny's party as I think it's called an extremist group, which has caused its offices to shut down across the country. Could Russia do anything internally that would cause the sum to be off?
Say the last part again?
Is a crackdown on internal dissent something that would stand in the way of the summit?
Well, first let me say that the United States put in place a number of sanctions in reaction to the treatment of Navalny in coordination with our European partners several weeks ago. It was separate, or it was earlier than the other set of sanctions that we announced, but we did to put those in place because exactly of their treatment of Navalny. Obviously, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, values are all issues that the President, Secretary Blinken, National Security Advisor Sullivan raised with their counterparts. But the invitation to have a discussion and have a meeting was not offered with the prerequisite that every issue is resolved in advance. We expect we will still continue to have disagreements, and we will certainly voice those if and when that meeting happens. So no, that wouldn't be a predetermined component of it, but certainly we will continue to voice concern, and we will put in place consequences as actions warrant.
And just one more on vaccine holdover from Tuesday. The president said he talked up these ideas of incentives for people to get the shot, including sports tickets and shopping discounts and stuff like that. He said he liked that idea. Does he like the idea that some governors are floating of payments to people? And is there an issue of sensitivity when Americans are getting paid to get a shot, but people are dying in Brazil and India and all kinds of places?
Well, there are a number of states who are implementing different programs to ensure they are meeting people where they are. They are reaching people who are less inclined to get vaccinated for a range of reasons. What we've actually seen in our data is that the big driving factor is access, and that's why we have massively increased our efforts to put more supply in pharmacies, to have mobile units, to partner with primary care physicians and doctors. But we know, as the president said, that states will take different actions and take different steps to ensure that their populations are vaccinated and that they're getting the shots in the arms of as many Americans as possible. That remains our first priority. At the same time, Jeff, as you know, we have also announced a number of steps we're taking to contribute to be a part of the global effort to defeat the pandemic, because we know that the pandemic will not be stopped by borders, including the intention to distribute 60 million doses, to donate 60 million doses of AstraZeneca. And we also are going to work with international partners, with the pharmaceutical companies, to up the supply, to get as much supply out into the global community as possible.
Okay with the idea if it works?
He supports, we all support, the administration supports efforts by different governors to take steps to ensure there's more vaccines in the arms of Americans. Let me just go ahead.
Thanks, Jim. On the subject of the stimulus checks, the president sent out a letter to millions of Americans who have gotten these checks. And just a few weeks ago, when you were asked if his name was going to be on the checks, he said this is not about him. So why did he feel the need to send this letter?
Well, I think the primary driving reason at the time, several weeks ago, was that it could potentially delay the direct payments going out if they needed to be signed by the president. And we just didn't think that was an appropriate step to take. So this is a pretty standard letter that goes out with physical checks that are made, of which there are a small percentage of these checks that are actually physical checks. But it was just a letter that went out with them, but not intended to make it about him. It's about the American people, and we didn't have him sign the checks because we were concerned about any impact that would have on delaying them going out to the public.
Okay, and a couple more questions for some colleagues who cannot be here.
Okay.
The first is from some of our friends in Atlanta, and it's about the Atlanta mayor's announcement that she is not going to seek re-election. She, of course, was a supporter of the president's. Just a few weeks ago, he even participated in a fundraiser. So was he given a heads up that she was about this announcement? What is his reaction to the announcement? And are there any discussions to bring her into the administration?
I believe she's already announced what she intends to do. I'll let her speak to that, which is to go into the private sector, but I don't have any other insight into her decision making. And she remains, of course, someone who the president has a fondness for, and you know, they got to know each other a little bit during the campaign, but beyond that, I'm not aware of a heads up that he personally had.
Okay, and one more for another colleague. Given today's jobs report, does the White House have any concerns about raising taxes on the wealthy as the president has proposed?
We don't. What we're talking about here, just as a reminder, is bringing the highest income bracket up to what it was during President George W. Bush's administration, impacting about 1% of the public. No one making under $400,000 a year would have their taxes go up. That's a line in the sand for the president, and that remains his approach and policy moving forward. And also, what these tax proposals are meant to do is to pay for a historic investment in infrastructure, historic investments in childcare and education, something that there is broad support for across the country. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I have two questions. I just asked President Biden if he believes the Iranians are serious about negotiation in Vienna, and he said yes, but how serious and what they're prepared to do. So after 3 rounds of talks, is the White House frustrated with the lack of progress? Are you there where you want to be? And if diplomacy fails, what are your options to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons?
Well, first, we always knew that this would be a long process and challenging. But we also feel that it has been a good sign that there have been diplomatic engagements over the past several weeks, even through indirect channels with the Iranians. Some progress has been made, and we have a better idea of what we need to do moving forward. Both to come into, of what we need to do to come back into full compliance, and Iran has a better idea of what it needs to do to come back into compliance. Returning to the deal, as you know, would require Iran to significantly roll back its nuclear program and block every available pathway to a nuclear weapon. But the talks are continuing. That is a good sign, and I'm not going to get ahead of a prediction of what the outcome will be of them.
Right, okay. On Yemen, the president envoy, Linda King, just got back from the region, as you know, from the Gulf, and he said that he offered a fair deal to the rebels in Yemen, the Houthis, and they rejected it. What leverage does the White House have, considering that the president put it as a top priority for him to end the war in Yemen and the suffering of the Yemeni people?
Are you talking about the group that the administration group that was just overseas on a trip to?
But the P1 and the UN as well, they've been part of this as well.
You know, I would have to talk to our national security team about kind of the status of those and where things are. And your leverage question is an excellent one, but I haven't gotten a briefing from them after their trip.
Right, but your general policy towards Yemen and ending the war, do you still believe that you're on track as well? Or is this another setback in foreign policy for this administration?
No, we still are moving forward on our path. Obviously, we want to get to a point where there is stability, where there is a lasting ceasefire in the region, and that certainly is our objective.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I have questions on a couple different topics. First, given the number of former Obama administration officials that are now in this Biden administration and the president's relatively light schedule, there's a growing perception that this is really just the third term of President Obama. What do you say to people who say that?
Who were saying that? Who's saying that?
You hear that a lot in the media.
Who in the media?
Different people.
Like,
Well, there was lots of questions about when you had Japanese Prime Minister Suga here on the one and only so far in-person bilateral head of state meeting. It was Vice President Kamala Harris who greeted the Prime Minister. Many people found that odd. She's already taking independent one-on-one calls with key allies like Prime Minister Morrison and Justin Trudeau. So I just want to get your reaction to people who question that.
well, it's hard to react when I don't know what people you're talking about. I will say that the president met with the prime minister, as you know, and had a full meeting, a full press conference afterwards, and they even shared a meal. So, and the president has had dozens of conversations and calls with world leaders, and should be no surprise that the vice president is also playing an important role, engaging with and having discussions with foreign leaders.
It's more so than other vice presidents have.
How so? I'd love to see the data. If you want to present that to
Provide
us.
you with that sometimes, and would
Sure.
love to get your reaction on it.
Would welcome it.
Excellent. And then on the coronavirus, it's a matter of public record that Dr. Fauci and the NIH funded gain-of-function experimentation research at the Wuhan lab of virology. And given the questions about that lab, why would Dr. Fauci in the U.S. fund that kind of experiments, that kind of research in a Chinese lab?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you super well. What was the beginning part of your question?
I said that the NIH and Dr. Fauci had provided funding to the Wuhan lab of virology. That's the lab in question when we talk about the lab leak theory. And given that gain-of-function research is dicey, why would the U.S. fund that in China? Why would Dr. Fauci?
I'm happy to send you to the NIH about more specifics of what program they funded and more details of that.
Now, I do have one more follow-up on
Okay.
that because the president hasn't really weighed in. Dr. Fauci is one of the voices who discredit the lab leak theory, but now there's more officials in the Biden administration, like the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA Director, and now also the NIH Director, who say that this cannot be ruled out, and there's calls for more investigation into it. Who does the president agree with, Dr. Fauci or the other officials? Does he think it was a lab leak?
Well, the president has said, and I've said from here many times, that there needs to be a credible, independent investigation through the World Health Organization, and that one that relies on data, relies on participation from China and other countries that may have information. That's certainly something everybody has called for, and we look forward to that happening.
Why hasn't the president spoken with President Xi about the origins of the coronavirus yet? He said just a few weeks ago he hadn't yet.
I think we have given a readout of his call, and also that the president believes there should be an independent investigation led by health experts, and one where their data is provided, that's provided transparently to our medical and science experts here in the United States, and we look forward to reviewing that. We're going to have to go on. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Emerald. I think you've had plenty of time today. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Secretary Yellen talked today about how schools being open kind of unevenly, hybrid, some days it's in person, some days it's not, can affect people's ability to go back to the workforce. Secretary Walsh mentioned that earlier. And I think both Secretary Yellen, Walsh, and you have all mentioned childcare as well. Given today's jobs report, is that an indication that there is more the administration needs to do to get more schools open faster, or an indication that childcare needs to move higher on the priority list?
Well, first let me say what Secretary Cardona has conveyed, which is consistent with the president's view, is that we need to have schools open 5 days a week, 100% of schools across the country. We've seen data come out, that's from March. There's a little bit of a delay, not delay, it's done on a monthly basis, but it's done about a month later, which shows that more than 50% of schools are open 5 days a week. That's moving in the right direction, but there's certainly more work that needs to be done. And they're looking toward, of course, the fall. As Secretary Cardona has said, he wants schools to open quickly. They have the resources now. We have mitigation steps and measures that have been put out by the CDC, and he is working, this is his top priority, and he's working with districts across the country to do it as quickly as possible. So there was already an urgency in doing that, ensuring that was happening as quickly as possible, but there's no question that the impact of the pandemic, the fact that 2 million women have left the workforce, the burdens of, the challenges of balancing work, childcare, elder care at times, has had an impact on women and on our economy overall.
Can I do a quick follow-up on the Iran question?
Yeah.
Iran's top negotiator is quoted as saying today the United States has expressed its readiness to lift many of its sanctions on Iran at the Vienna talks, but Tehran is demanding more. Is that a fair assessment of where things stand?
Well, first let me say the State Department has done briefings on this, but let me reiterate what they have said, which is that we will not get into a situation where the United States does more than is required by the JCPOA agreement in terms of sanction relief, and Iran does less. So what we're really talking about is mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA. We'd be prepared to lift the sanctions necessary for our JCPOA compliance only if Iran were prepared to return its nuclear program to its JCPOA status. So that is our view, and how Special Envoy Rob Malley, who's been exploring concrete steps concrete approaches concerning the steps both Iran and the U.S. can take, that's what our approach and the bottom line is from our end. Go ahead, Kelly.
When you give us the week ahead and you talk more about the leader meeting, what impact do you think Leader McConnell's comments about working with great focus against the Biden agenda? He said it in a number of times now, and does the president view that as an impediment to having a productive meeting, or is that just politics that he's willing to write off? How does the president view that? Well,
The president's view is that he's ready to have a clean slate, and let's welcome the leaders here. He believes his goal and what the American people elected him to do was to bring the country together, to bring leaders together too, to discuss how we can move together and put people back to work, put in place an agenda, put in place policies that will help contribute to doing exactly that. He also has said, and we're not at this point, that inevitably there will be some strong disagreements with Republicans, and we know that. He was in the Senate for 36 years. He's certainly no stranger to that. And that he's ready to debate, he's ready to, but he's also ready to press forward and doing work on behalf of the American people. So he will continue to seek bipartisan paths forward. Doesn't matter the language or the rhetoric of folks on the other side of the aisle, because he believes it's what the American people elected him to do. Go ahead in the back.
Quick follow-up on your answer before. Given that you guys see childcare is so important to the labor market, was it a mistake to put childcare in the second part of the infrastructure plan? Should it have actually been included in the first? Should it be an even higher priority?
Well, first, the child tax credit was extended in the American Rescue Plan, and those benefits, which are currently being implemented and going out to families across the country, is something that we think will help reduce poverty and help families who need help the most at this time. He proposed it as part of, they're not seen, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan are both seen as pivotal priorities to the president, and ones where he's looking forward to talking with leaders in Congress about how to move them forward. And if they come to the table and want to push for the ordering of things or the mechanisms for the components moving forward, he's happy to hear from them on that as well. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hello. I forgot it was Friday. Hello. Well, thank you. I apologize. Well, thank you. As a part of our effort to bring more people into the briefing room, today we have Shabeli Karazana. Tell me if I butchered your last name. As someone with the last name Psaki, I certainly understand if I did that, and I apologize. Joining us from the 19th. So welcome. How can I answer your questions today?
Well, thanks so much, Jen. And it's okay, everyone butchers my name, so I'm kind of used to it at this point. But you didn't do too bad. I have two for you. One of them is on childcare. The American Rescue Plan included a $39 billion investment to stabilize the childcare industry. That money has already gone out to states. But the administration also said it would provide guidance on how the states should best disperse those funds. It's an important question considering the massive administrative challenge this poses for states. So I'm considering that money's been out for about a month now, or almost a month. When is the guidance from the administration coming, and what can we expect it to say about what states should prioritize when distributing the funds?
Well, first, in mid-April, I know you've been following this closely, but for others, the administration, we announced $39 billion to help early childhood educators and family child care providers keep their doors open. And this funding is, of course, a critical step for child care centers around the country. You're right that the next step is providing this guidance for how it should be distributed. We're also working at the same time to implement and get a lot of programs up and going and implement the American Rescue Plan as quickly as possible. I asked our team about this, and what I can tell you is it's going to come soon, and we are eager to get it out the door, and we are finalizing components of that guidance to get it out to states, to child care providers, to territories, so that they can implement, they can get this funding into the communities that need it the most.
Great. And I have one more sort of similar theme. A coalition of groups recently sent a letter to the administration about the establishment of the Equitable Data Working Group, which was part of an executive order in January that was around, beginning the work of collecting better data on sex and gender and different topics. The coalition also requested a meeting with Ambassador Susan Rice. So I'm wondering what you can tell us about when the administration plans to convene this working group on data, and what we should expect to hear from the group. Does it plan to collect better intersectional data, which we know has been missing from the vaccine data, for example? And is there a plan for a meeting?
Yeah, so let me say that the Equitable Data Working Group was stood up around Inauguration Day as part of the equity executive order the president signed. The group meets weekly and is evaluating data disaggregation, transparency, and sufficiency, and it's charged overall with identifying inadequacies in federal data collection. So from programs to policies and infrastructure across agencies. And the hope is that refining and measuring this data will help address equity over the long term. So they do meet on a weekly basis. In terms of Ambassador Rice, I know pushing for the racial equity EO and overseeing the implementation of a number of components of our racial equity agenda is under her purview, and I can certainly check if she's been a part of those meetings. I wouldn't be surprised if she has been. But it's very nice to meet you over the screen. We'll look forward to welcoming you into the White House soon. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great weekend.
And will week ahead come out later?
Yes, that is, I take full blame for that. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, happy Mother's Day to everyone too.